One day, the divine farmer Shenong was searching the forest for edible plants and herbs when he accidentally consumed poisonous ones. Throughout the day, Shenong was poisoned several times and his condition worsened. However, by chance, a leaf fell into his mouth and saved him. As Shenong chewed the leaf, the effects of the toxins in his body disappeared, and this miraculous event led to the discovery of the medicinal properties of tea. According to legend, this is why tea held such an important place in ancient China. Although we now know that tea doesn't cure poisoning, this legend about Shenong highlights how significant he was in ancient Chinese culture. In fact, archaeological findings suggest that tea was cultivated in China around 6,000 years ago. While the tea plant was initially used as food, over time, the way people began to use it to prepare beverages gave rise to a great cultural tradition. Tea became not just a drink in China, but also an art form, an integral part of the culture. For this reason, tea became the favorite drink of Chinese emperors and eventually spread across the world, being embraced in various forms by different cultures. Even today, tea remains an important part of daily life and special ceremonies in many cultures, just as it was in ancient times. In the 9th century, during the Tang dynasty, a Japanese monk traveled to China, where he learned about the profound knowledge and culture of the time. He brought this information back to Japan and taught it to others. In the 14th century, during the Ming dynasty, Chinese Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang led significant changes in tea production and consumption. Previously, tea was transported and used in the form of compressed bricks, which allowed it to be stored for longer periods and transported over long distances. However, Emperor Zhu preferred the use of tea in its leaf form, considering it to be more natural, pure, and rich in flavor. This change accelerated the spread of tea and its acceptance by a wider audience. During this period, China held almost a complete monopoly on tea plants worldwide. For China, tea was not just a beverage, but also an important economic and diplomatic tool. The spread of tea also led to the development of various tea cultures. Tea ceremonies in Japan, the adoption of tea by the British in India, and the tradition of tea time in Europe were all part of this process. The global spread of tea gained significant momentum in the early 17th century, when Dutch traders began importing tea to Europe on a large scale. This period marked a turning point for Europe in terms of encountering new food products and beverages. Many historians note that the popularity of tea among the English aristocracy is linked to the marriage of Catherine of Braganza, of Portuguese origin, to King Charles II of England in 1661. Catherine herself was fond of tea, and this sparked interest in the custom among the court's elite. At the time, Great Britain was expanding its colonial empire and striving to become the world's new leading power. As the British Empire grew, so did the interest in and demand for tea. By the early 18th century, tea in Europe was 10 times more expensive than coffee. During this period, tea was cultivated only in China and was considered a highly valuable commodity in Europe. Tea trade was such a profitable business that fierce competition emerged among Western trading companies. This competition led to the invention of clipper ships, the fastest sailing vessels of their time. These ships were used by companies to deliver their tea to Europe more quickly, thereby maximizing their profits. Previously, Great Britain paid for Chinese tea with silver. However, as this trade became increasingly expensive and heavily impacted the country's financial reserves, British officials proposed replacing silver with another commodity. Opium was widely produced in the British-controlled regions of India, and its trade brought substantial profits to Britain. The intensification of Britain's opium trade with China led to a serious public health crisis in China. In 1839, a high-ranking official named Lin Zexu ordered the destruction of a shipment of opium that had been brought to China by the British. This event sparked the first opium war between the two countries. The conflict primarily took place along the Chinese coast, particularly around the South China Sea and the Canton region. Thanks to their superior technology and modern military power, the British Army and Navy defeated the Chinese forces. As a result, in 1842, the Qing dynasty was forced to sign the Treaty of Nanking with Britain. This treaty ceded the island of Hong Kong to the British and compelled China to reopen trade with Britain under unfavorable conditions. Additionally, China was forced to sign similar treaties with several other European nations. As a result of the First Opium War, China lost its position on the international stage for over a century. The British East India Company devised plans to take control of tea production and gain greater influence in the industry. To achieve this, they hired the renowned botanist Robert Fortune to secretly acquire tea plants and cultivation techniques from China. Disguising his identity, Fortune embarked on a dangerous expedition into China's mountainous tea regions. As a result, he successfully smuggled tea plants and experienced tea workers to Darjeeling, India. Following this successful operation, tea Tea cultivation spread widely across India, and in a short time, tea became a daily staple for everyone. Today, tea has earned the status of the second most consumed beverage in the world, after water. The culture of tea drinking is incredibly diverse, with different regions showcasing unique traditions. From the classic Turkish tea prepared in rice to the salty, buttery tea consumed in Tibet, the methods of preparing and serving tea around the world are truly rich and varied. However, behind every cup of tea lies a story, reminding us that it is not just a beverage, but also a part of cultural exchange and history.